we didn't know, both with technology, with the internet, and then with social media, and then with influencers and creators, something new comes along and we have no way of knowing, where is this going to go? What are going to be the ramifications? We're at a different stage now than we were 10 years ago, 12 years ago.
Welcome to Shaping Freedom with Lisanne Basquiat, the podcast where we help you unlock your potential and redefine what it means to be free. I'm your host, Lisanne Basquiat. I'm a former corporate executive, a life strategist, and the founder of Shaping Freedom. With a background spanning corporate, artistic, and personal development, I bring a unique perspective to empowering others. Listen in to discover inspiring stories and practical insights that will help you reclaim your life and rewrite your narrative. My intention is for you to gain the tools and motivation to be free in your relationships, your communities, and within yourself. This, my friends, is Shaping Freedom.
Hi, friends. This is a conversation that you don't want to miss. Today, I'm speaking with Leah Haberman about how you can participate in social media without burning out. We talked about a lot of things during this episode that I think are going to be incredibly important to you. One is, what is this role of being an influencer and what does it have in common with running a business? We also talked about how influencers are able to successfully model boundaries and self-care. This work looks really easy, but it takes a lot of work. And we dive into what that work looks like and how they can take care of themselves. And then lastly, we talked about how parents can manage their kids' experience with social media. It's a big part of their lives and something that we really need to pay attention to. Here's my conversation with Leah Haberman. I am so excited about today's guest and the topic that we're going to cover today. I'm thrilled to meet you, Leah. I have the privilege and joy of having a conversation with Leah Haberman, who is a social media consultant and does influencer marketing. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you teach several classes at UCLA, and you have this very long experience professionally of being in the world of social media and all of the things that are around and at the center of that. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I'm very happy that you're here too. So we got introduced through Billy Johnson, who is the founder of Media Repertoire, who's helps me with PR. We've been talking a lot at Shaping Freedom about burnout and creators and what that world looks like. And so I am really happy to have the opportunity to connect with you and to share with the audience your perspectives on social media and on this thing that is kind of taken over our lives.
Yeah, and I've got so much to say on burnout, just from working for influencers, hiring influencers for campaigns who have then disappeared because they decided to quit. I write a newsletter myself, and I see, I have sponsors sometimes in my newsletter, and I see how much pressure there is to show up and deliver, and how busy I am and how little time there is to do things. So I really see it kind of from a 360-degree perspective.
Let's stop first of all, if you don't mind. I'd love to have you introduce yourself to the audience. Let us know who you are and how you came to consult on social media and on what's happening on the internet.
Yeah. Well, like you said, we were introduced through Billy. I worked at Yahoo at the time with Billy, and I was brought on to lead social media for their entertainment division. Mm-hmm. And I had started working in social media a few years before that, basically the dawn of social media. Like Facebook came out, Twitter came out, involved in getting one of the first Twitter accounts set up at the company that I was working at then when Twitter was launched. Then we had YouTube, then we had Instagram, then Snapchat. I mean, there's like Vine, all the graveyard also of the apps that kind of have the social apps that have disappeared. And And so it's just a world that I have been in that I really enjoy. I've either worked in-house or I've worked for companies helping them with social media and their influencer marketing strategy. I write a newsletter, as I mentioned, called In Case You Missed It, or ICYMI, which tries to help people keep up with all of the updates and the news and everything that comes out every day, every hour. It's relentless. And then I do teach at UCLA Extension. I have 3 classes this summer. So it's becoming an influencer, working with influencers, and then a general social media marketing course.
Wow. So you are the person that we need to be having this conversation with, because you've been here since the beginning of it. I mean, in my lifetime, I'm almost 60. And I started my Facebook account when in 2009, right? And at that point, who would know that social media, these platforms for connecting with people, would become what it is today, which is just like 80% of a lot of people's lives on a day-to-day basis. I guess my real question is the idea that a person would use social media as a profession is so new. What have you seen in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, people becoming influencers, we used to have traditional celebrities and models who were the influencers. And then at the beginning of social media, I'd say there were kind of 2 different groups. There were mommy bloggers who were some of the first influencers. These were women that, were maybe stay-at-home mothers, were finding, or they even working mothers, and they were finding ways to connect with other mothers online because they were relatively limited in, they were either at work or they were with family. And then also, interestingly, fashion bloggers was kind of another category of people who, I would say not necessarily replaced Vogue, but, I think all of the fashion media used to be the ones that decided what's cool, what are we going to wear? And all of a sudden, fashion bloggers who were able to turn things around much more quickly and have an opinion, they became more powerful. Then you moved into, once Instagram came out in, I think it was 2012, you got Instagram influencers. And then when TikTok came out in 2018, you got TikTokers. And I think just it became easier and easier to become an influencer. That does not mean that being an influencer is easy and that it's not hard work, especially being a professional influencer who makes their full-time money. But I think it's just the opportunities kept kind of widening to be able to, have all these people go into it. And I think right now we're at this stage where anyone can be an influencer,
right.
Like anyone that has a community online, has some influence with that community, some impact, and has, posts regular content. Like there are farmer influencers, there are office worker influencers, there are, therapist influencers. Like anyone can be an influencer. And so I think it's the ultimate democratization that social media first brought around in terms of like who gets to hold the mic and whose message gets out there. And now I think influencers is kind of like that next level of anybody can grow an audience and share, what they have to say.
Mm-hmm. And there's also a bit of there's a challenge with social media because it has become the thing that people interact with. I mean, it started off as a way of connecting community, and now the connections are so strong and the bond is so strong to us within culture that there are some ramifications to that and consequences that I don't think that we all expected, just around being tied to our phones, to this kind of like little rectangular thing. So I really would love for us to talk a little bit about burnout that you kind of served up in the beginning of the conversation. Let's talk about that and what that looks like today.
And I think there's obviously different levels of burnout, and it depends whether you're, a part-time or kind of a side hustle influencer, or whether you're a full-time influencer or creator. There's YouTube has kind of talked about, they've given it at different events and conferences, they've talked about creators being end-to-end production studios. So like a creator plans the content, produces the content, stars in the content, edits the content, distributes the content. And I think that is one thing that made influencers so popular, especially during the pandemic when everything was locked down. You couldn't have a whole production team. So you give something to an influencer, they shoot everything at home, and you're able to put up, whatever it is, a sponsored post, a Facebook ad, an Instagram ad. So I think that idea really took off. But that is a lot of hats to wear. And on top of all of those things, so you're already, I would say, exhausted from the constant demand for content creation. You're chasing the algorithm, which I feel like, especially as more and more influencers appear and the market gets really saturated, the harder it is to get those views, to get that engagement. On top of that, if you're a full-time influencer, you're trying to go after brand deals. So you're also a business manager and, you're sending invoices and you're, pitching yourself to other businesses and brands. And so there's just a lot that these influencers and creators have to do. And I think it gets minimized.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the fact that this is such a new career path. And I think a lot of it has to do with some of the more traditional career paths just don't exist anymore for people, right? Back in the day, you got a corporate job and you did that corporate job for a couple of decades, and then you got a watch and you went off and, I don't know, fished or did something, right?
You stayed there forever.
Yeah.
And that's not an option anymore.
Exactly. And now today there's this new kind of opportunity to showcase yourself, but it comes with quite a bit that people may or may not be prepared to respond to, like the administrative ends, the sides of aspects of being a content creator. And I know that you teach some of this in your classes. So what are some of the tips that you have for people who are looking to make this a career path for themselves, or looking to monetize this work that they're doing online?
Yeah, it's really hard work. I'll just start with that because I never want to minimize. I say anyone can become an influencer or creator, but I never want to minimize the amount of work that goes into it. If it was that easy, we would all do it. So that's kind of just the caveat that I want to put out there. Because otherwise, I do think it is a viable career option these days. I teach it in school. You're right about the business aspect or the financial literacy aspect, because you've got to look after your own taxes. It's like you're a small business. You have to think of all of the things. Are you going to get incorporated? All of those things that a small business has to think about. So I think that is tricky. And I think that's the part that people overlook the most. Parents, people, industry leaders, again, like the people that think, oh, being an influencer is taking, selfies and there's not all that much to it. I think what they miss out on is you have to have a value proposition. You have to have a business plan. You have to have product market fit, like all of these things that a startup or small business has. That is what creators or influencers need to have. Now, the creators or influencers who are able to figure all of this out, understand what makes them unique, what their value proposition is, understand which audience they're aiming for, understand what platform they're on, what content format that audience wants to watch, understand where they're going to get paid. Is it going to be brand dollars where you do sponsored content? Is it going to be ad revenue? If you're on YouTube, YouTube's going to pay you once you get into the YouTube Partner Program. YouTube will pay you for video views. Is it going to be you're creating content for other brands, for example? There's so many different ways, but I think that is something that creators and influencers, the earlier you think about all of those things, the more you set yourself up for success.
And actually, before we go there, is there a difference between an influencer and a content creator? And if there is, what is the difference?
Yes. And that's a great question. I'm glad that you brought it up. We all tend to use the terms interchangeably, but they're not technically interchangeable. So almost all influencers are creators, but not all creators are influencers. What I mean by that, an influencer works with brands, promotes their products to an audience that they have built, and upon which they can have an influence. Okay. So if a brand is hiring you, to get through to your audience because they view your audience as potential customers for them, you are an influencer. A creator is somebody who creates content. It could be just for themselves. It could be they create content just for brands. Some creators have audiences, but a lot of them don't have particularly large audiences. You've got people who are just doing it for the love of creating. Maybe it's a side hustle. So I think where it's most important is when, particularly whether you're a marketer and you're hiring for a campaign, or you're somebody that is pitching yourself or answering, responding to an ad, for example, that's looking for influencers or creators. If you're a creator and you don't have a really strong audience or community, you don't have any influence on them, they're not going to buy what you're posting online. They're not going to watch a show. They're not going to buy tickets. They're not going to go to a restaurant. And you try and go out for a role as an influencer where they're looking to make an impact on your audience.
Do you know that we have a line of Shaping Freedom wellness products? Each are beautifully crafted and designed to support you in cherishing your mind, body, emotions, and soul. Carve out a sanctuary in your life with our Luxe sustainable yoga and meditation mats, essential oil candles, and more. Embrace self-care and reflection with every item, lovingly created to enhance your daily practice of spending time on you. Elevate your wellness journey with Shaping Sanctuary Collection because you deserve to feel balanced, nurtured, and inspired. Visit shapingsanctuary.com for more information.
Let's talk about how the impact and the consequence, both the positive and some of the more negative consequences of interacting with this idea of community that has been created over the last 15 years or so, what that kind of looks like today and how it's positioning itself within our culture.
Yeah, and I think there has been, like you said earlier, we didn't know, both with technology, with the internet, and then with social media, and then with influencers and creators, something new comes along and we have no way of knowing, where is this going to go? What are going to be the ramifications? And I would say that we're at a different stage now than we were 10 years ago, 12 years ago. At the beginning, like you said, social media, it's called social. It was really about connecting and communicating with people online. On Facebook, they were emphasizing friends and family, finding the people that you knew in real life, also making new friends, but it was really about this kind of community aspect. I think that we are moving into more sort of an entertainment era of social media. And so it's less about following your friends and family and looking at their content. Maybe on Instagram, that's because of the algorithm and you just keep being introduced stuff that they think you might like, which is not your actual friends and family posting. And then on TikTok was never about social and connecting with your community. It was always about connecting around interests or serving you content based around the topics that you responded to, and then serving you more of those topics. And if you follow maybe your friends and family, you'll never see anything from them because they might not be posting the recipes that you like or the shoes that you want to buy or whatever it is. And so they're never going to show up in your feed. Mm-hmm. And so I think that at the beginning, there was maybe a little bit more, I liked it. There was a lot more value, I would say, to connecting people. Not that entertainment is bad, but I do think that we're shifting, and I'm not sure that legislators and brands and thought leaders are entirely aware. I think some people are still thinking of, it's about connection. But I think we are moving more into an entertainment era, and it's just about continually swiping. Is that good for us? I mean, I don't know. It's really hard to say. I don't want to be that person that says, because this is, not necessarily my era. I think social media right now is very much geared towards, it's shifting from millennials to Gen Z and Gen Alpha. And so, I think sometimes there's this, people who are older are like, oh, it's not as good as when I had it. Like TV was better, social was better,
of course.
Whatever it was is better. Like streaming is better than TV or whatever it is. So I don't want to kind of come in and say like, oh, it was better in the old days. But I do wonder about the value, and also just with the short video, you can spend so much more time, see so much more content, but not a lot of it resonates with you. You don't remember who was the creator, influencer who posted that content. You're not seeing your friends and family. It's very addictive in a way that you can spend hours and hours. Is that better than spending hours watching a documentary or a TV show? Like, Americans watch a lot of TV. So I struggle with that myself in wondering, is this just the equivalent of when we were kids and our moms would say, turn off the TV, you've had enough screen time. Is this just that equivalent, or is this something darker and less beneficial to society as a whole that is, kind of leading us down a dark path? We see there are statistics out there about teenagers and especially teenage girls and how they become depressed based on, the toxicity of social media, things that they're encountering. So I think there's probably an element to it. Like I said, that there is something dark there that is not necessarily, positive and productive. But again, it's really hard to tell. Like 10 years from now, if we had this conversation again, maybe this would have looked like the good old days.
Exactly. Exactly.
And so, and whatever's coming next is like AI is going to be the thing that we're all worried about. And our kids are going to say, AI is terrible, and or maybe AI is the good thing to them, and the next thing is the bad thing. It's hard to predict just based on the volatility of where social media and influencer marketing have gone.
Yeah, I think I've had a lot of those same questions, and I've wondered the same thing. And it's like, okay, let me stop scrolling now, and then I'm going to turn on the TV. So it's like, what's the difference, right?
Yes.
Am I going to lose myself in a 45-minute episode of something on TV, or watch a movie, or am I going to, spend my time scrolling? And I think that there is a lot of conversation, getting back to your point about kind of the darker sides of it, where female teenagers are experiencing a loss of identity, I think, in a lot of ways, and this illusion that beauty is tied to whatever it is that that social media is feeding up. I don't know that it's any different from when I was younger, where, all the magazines told you and defined what beauty was. As a young Black woman, I'm really deeply rooted, so it didn't affect me in the same way. And there is something to looking through magazines where you have people who are, very, whatever that idea of beauty is, having that presented to you both on commercials and in magazines. And
I think
today,
what
is the difference between that and what's happening today?
Well, the difference is magazines you could pick up, and you weren't necessarily reading your mom's magazines. You were reading age-appropriate teenage magazines, for example.
Okay.
Whereas now on social, there are no barriers or boundaries anymore. Kids are getting adult content, adults are getting teenage content. It's like everything's been mashed together. And so kids are seeing adult situations, adult products portrayed amongst the content that they're watching that might be age appropriate. And so there's kind of this flattening of, what is age appropriate? Like, if everything is on your TikTok feed and you're watching kid content, teen content, adult content, brand content, and it's all in one feed, I think for kids, for Gen Alpha and Gen Z, they start to see, oh, like maybe we now know, like, they're shopping at Sephora and Ulta a lot, and they're buying these products that are adult women products. But like I said, when you were a teenager, you were probably reading teenage magazines until you got to the age where you were like, oh, I want to read the grown-up magazines because I'm sophisticated now. I'm like 16 or 18 or whatever it is. And like, I'm a grown-up. Whereas, now, like all of the content is available to them. And they're seeing everything. So there's no delineation anymore between this is appropriate for you because you're 12 or 13 and, this other stuff should wait till you're 16 or 18 or whatever stage of life. Now it's just all together in one place. And so I think that's part of why we're seeing these young girls that are buying adult beauty products and going to Sephora and Ulta. And we're getting all these stories from employees at Sephora and Ulta saying like it's overrun by 10 to 12-year-olds and they're rude and they're like knocking things over and it's just like a nightmare scenario. But I think a lot of that is caused by this boundaryless content that they have access to at all times.
So are you suggesting that similar to what has happened within the film industry, that there be some age restrictions put on different content? And how do you determine that?
Yeah, it's so hard. I mean, I know there's states like Florida that are putting restrictions on, what age you can be when you get social media. And then like the unanticipated consequences of that might be people who are marginalized or introverts, for example, who thrive online, then you're depriving them of the opportunity. In the same way, when you say, like, what would I do? Would you put PG ratings on content or something? I think it's on the parents a lot to monitor what their kids are watching.
And to see who they're following.
Certainly see who they're private messaging. That's a huge one. But I understand if you're a working parent, it is very hard to take that time and monitor your kid. And you're not always going to be able to monitor your kid.
Yeah.
So it's like there's no one perfect answer. What I would advocate for is definitely parental supervision and parental education. Like
always about everything.
Yes. Education is so important. The parents need to know about it. The teachers need to know about it. We need to talk about it. I think having maybe I know that like government oversight is not necessarily a popular thing with people in the States, but I think having some sort of government education program, a little bit like a fitness program, like physical fitness test or whatever it is, having something like that around social media that is like positive and productive, but is just tells you about the facts and talks about the dangers and talks about the benefits. And I don't know how that rolls out to everyone in this country. Like, I think that would be a really challenging scenario, but I think that that's what's going to need to happen because parents today do not understand these new technologies and disappearing photos and DMs and all of these things that maybe weren't around when they got on social in the first place. So education, I think, is first and foremost what is needed.
Yeah. I think, I struggle with, and my children are older and I have a lot of friends who have younger children who are like teenagers or whatever. And I hear a lot, if it wasn't for social media. So I think in some ways, social media has become the catch-all for all the terrible things that are happening in the world. When, from my perspective, first of all, we have to find some solutions. What is it that's happening? What are we saying? Because social media is but a reflection of all the conversations we're all having. They're just out there and available to us within seconds. So maybe it's kind of peeling back the onion to get a better understanding of what it is that we're all saying and what we're conveying. Because if social media is a reflection of what's happening in the world and within these kind of microcosms of conversation, then there's body shaming. There's, violence, there's war, there's politics, there's racial situations happening. All of these things are really happening. And I think that as long as we kind of have this curtain and throw all of the world's problems onto this idea of social media, we're never going to be able to solve the things that social media is actually just bringing to the surface and exposing for us.
I think it's, to your point, like I think it's a combination of a lot of things. I think it's legislation, regulation, education, so that we learn, what are the problems. And once we see the problems, and I know that the, Silicon Valley social media or platform CEOs and founders are continually going to Washington and talking before Congress. Problem is that I don't think Congress understands what they're saying. Right. And so it's just, and they promise to bring out some feature that kind of mutes trolls or something. And then it's like, okay, cool. Like, go off and just keep running the world. But we're not really fundamentally changing anything. And so, I think like it starts with educating the adults as much as the kids, and then understanding what we're dealing with, and then putting guidelines or boundaries in place. I will say, myself as a parent, and I think also because I'm on social media so much, when my child wanted to start watching TikTok, we watched it together. And so, I would curate his feed essentially that's content you don't want to see. So we're going to either swipe past that, or we're going to mark that as we don't want to see more of that, so that you do create the experience that you want to see. Child. Yeah, right. The world that's appropriate for a child. I understand that not everybody either has the capacity or the time to do that. But I do think it is a really good, if your child is 9, 10, 11 years old and they're not yet on social media and they're begging you to get on social media, I think starting with, instead of watching TV, sitting down saying, hey, let's go through some TikToks. And there is good, funny, entertaining stuff there, and kind of curating that experience for them. I think it creates a good foundation for them, and also having time limits. Like, we're going to do this for a half hour, 45 minutes, and then we're doing something different.
Right.
Just in the same way that, our parents would have monitored our TV watching and would have turned off the TV after a certain amount of screen time.
HeraHub Carlsbad is a co-working space and member community designed to empower entrepreneurs. More than just a workspace, HeraHub Carlsbad is a business accelerator and a connected network of successful entrepreneurs. Imagine a collaborative, serene, and spa-inspired environment where you can thrive. Our unique community allows each member to be both a guide and a student, fostering leadership and continuous growth for both you and your business. Experience an uplifting, supportive atmosphere that will elevate your entrepreneurial journey. For more information about HeraHub Carlsbad or to schedule a tour, visit herahub.com/Carlsbad. We also have locations in Temecula, Irvine, Washington, D.C., and HeraHub Carlsbad is one of 3 HeraHub locations in San Diego, the others being in Mission Valley and La Jolla.
Let's talk a little bit about like the burnout and what can occur when we're spending as much time as we are, either on one side of the camera or watching it. Either way, doing too much of something is just not a good thing for us.
The burnout, I think, when you're on camera, like I said, you're the product. Like, yes, you're the business and you're the distribution, but you're also the product. And so everything is based on your appearance, and what you say. And I think that there's a tremendous amount of pressure in that. I think there's a hamster wheel of keeping up with making enough content, making content that your audience wants to see, making content that the algorithm will allow to go through and reach an audience. So that's incredibly tricky. And like you said, there are creators and influencers who have quit and or retired this year. It's become such a popular thing. There were so many YouTubers retiring at the turn of like 2023 into 2024 that now it's become kind of a gimmick for people to say, I'm retiring, but it's really just a hook to get people to watch the video and they're not actually retiring. But like that's how popular the format was. Then there's other people that have just deleted their accounts and walked away because they just don't want to deal with whether it's the pressures of the job or the harassment of people in the comments. And there are good people and there's a lot of horrible people. So I think it's incredibly difficult for creators. I do love that. I think this new generation, they're more transparent about it. Mm-hmm. They talk about it more. There are also more tools to help them exchange information, whether it's what did you get paid? This is what I got paid. Or what was your experience with this company? This was my experience. I think 5 years ago, even, we weren't doing that. And you didn't see that online. Whereas now, just in this, I think we're in an era of kind of, especially with young people, of like transparency and sharing, and the whole expression of like not gatekeeping, I think has led to really positive advancements for influencers or creators who have burnout. And then I would say, I think they also talk about it or incorporate it, or at least the ones that I think have a grasp on, good self-care and preserving their mental health. They'll talk about it. They'll say, I'm not going to be online this weekend. I'm taking a break. I can't wait to see you Monday. Then they come back Monday and they say, I had a great weekend. I couldn't wait to share it all with you. It becomes part of the conversation and the language that they're sharing with people, instituting these breaks or, boundaries that they tell the audience about. So they bring them along and it gets the audience invested and kind of cheering for this influencer, this creator, and like, yeah, I understand. That's a relatable scenario. I get burnt out. Like, I wish I had really good boundaries like you did. So I think that's good. I think for ourselves, the burnout, like there's an expression, doom scrolling, which is essentially just kind of that endless scroll. And it's something I struggle with. I'm not sure that I have a good solution. People talk about put your phone on the other side of the room so you're not going to check it first thing when you wake up in the morning. Delete apps off your phone, especially on the weekends, so you don't check Instagram or TikTok, for example. Live in the moment. I think those are all good things to say, but I think realistically, we do struggle. It's like junk food. Like there's a reason you want it because it's addictive and it makes you feel good. And you get that hit of dopamine when somebody responds to you or you see something you like and, you engage with whoever created that. So it's challenging.
Right.
There's no easy answer.
Right. But the problem with it is that if you find yourself, I was talking to someone earlier today about the fact that in 90 seconds, you can be hit with so many horrific things that are happening in the world, or comments that people make, really nasty comments when they're kind of hiding behind their device. And what that actually does to us to desensitize our ability to discern what's good for us versus what's not good for us. For me, a lot of times as I'm going, first of all, I try to be very careful about who I'm following and what I'm allowing.
Step one in creating a good social experience.
Absolutely. And I think also recognizing the fact that we are the creators of our social experience, just like we decide which news channel to watch or what TV show to watch or which movies. We should be doing the same thing with social media and to actively cleanse our feed of those things that don't give us the experience that we want to have while interacting, with our device. And understanding also that just like any other news platform, whether it be on TV or in our phones, something happens and it's just repeated over and over and over and over again. So you're kind of being re-traumatized, over and over again about the same thing from different people. So I think we do have to take this thing that we're calling social media and decide and create a strategy for how we're going to interact with it as a creator and, from the business side of it, but also as someone who's a consumer of this information, even if we're not paying for it, right? Just understanding that if you wouldn't open up your bedroom door or just like pull back your covers and say like, everybody, come on in, get into the bed. We're all in here together,
Yep.
Maniacs and wonderful people all together. I think we should take that interaction just that seriously, with the same level of scrutiny and discernment, that if you don't want to get up in the morning and feel like shit, then don't get up in the morning and feel like shit.
Right. I'm 100% on board. I think I have pruned my list of who I follow on Instagram, on Twitter, on TikTok, on every platform, even on Facebook, to people who are positive and productive and may have different opinions. I'm okay with different opinions.
I mean, that's the world, yeah.
Right. But I'm not inviting people in who, want to argue about things in a like not a positive way, or, troll other people, whether it's me. I don't tend to get trolled. I don't think I'm controversial enough for anybody to come troll me, but, they might be trolling other people. And if I see that you are actively harassing or hurting somebody, blocked. I do not want you in my feed. I think for me also, I try to follow more news sources. And I get what you're saying when there is a traumatic incident, it is very hard. To that end, I want to be informed. I think we all do, right? We want to know what happened.
And I think that's the hook.
Yeah.
So we have FOMO. We don't want to miss anything.
Right. And maybe there is also a benefit to being informed about what's happening, especially if it's local to you in your community, for example. So I think being really careful and intentional with the news sources that you're following. So following really reputable news sources. So you're not going to get false information, and you're not going to get horrific images that could be really upsetting or triggering to you. You're going to get the truth. You're going to get like, life is not pretty. You're going to get the news, but you're going to get it in a way that is like smart and informed. And then I think once you have read the news, I think that's the time to put it down. I think especially during times of, when something has happened, it's like not doom scrolling, not endlessly looking at the same headline over and over again. Like, you've been informed, go talk to your friends about it.
Yeah.
Have an actual conversation,
right?
Rather than just redigesting the same information over and over again.
Yeah. I'm dating myself so much during this conversation. When 9/11 happened many years ago, and I'm not a person who watches the news constantly. I'm like, just let me know what's going on and let me get about my life. And it was the first time in my life that I witnessed myself watch the same thing over and over again. And it was almost like a traumatization of the same situation. And I remember like picking my head up and thinking, wait a minute, I saw this like 1,000 times today.
Yeah.
I'm good. Like, let me just turn this off and let me go figure out how to heal from this horrific situation that happened in the world. And I think that that's where we are today. And that's what happens today. And unfortunately, there are the things that are the big newsworthy events, politics, and all of that. But then there are these kind of mini or micro newsworthy events that happen that people run to social media to find out about. Some of them are horrific, some of them are great, and a lot of them are horrific, And so I think that's also part of the appeal of social media, because you can go there and you can get, I'll talk about, for me, as someone who follows hip hop and, is into the culture, right? That, Kendrick Drake thing, I wasn't watching that on the news. The place that I was able to follow it bar by bar was, on social media. That's where it was being reported.
Right.
For the person who is into, food, they're not going to hear about the latest food, discoveries or latest recipes on the news. So I think that the ways that we're absorbing information and the types of information that we're receiving is very, very different today. So we have to really, I think one of the things with freedom is understanding what to do with it. And so if we today do have the freedom to get this information in the way that we want it, I think we have to be accountable for what we actually receive and take the time and the energy to curate our feed and to show our children as an act of self-care how to curate their feeds and to put this idea of social media into its proper place, because I think that we're overwhelmed by it.
I love that. I love that you said accountable. I think also intentional.
Absolutely.
Like if you see something that is traumatizing, take an action, like go donate to a GoFundMe, go educate yourself about whatever this issue is, go talk to somebody, go make sure that if this is happening in your community, what can you do about it? Like the Drake Kendrick Lamar, I don't know that there's a lot you could do. Maybe go put on an album. I don't even know if there's albums anymore, but like go turn something on Spotify and like listen to the music. Yeah. But it's, I think it's just like the intentionality matters as well. And it's like endless scrolling should not be the goal.
Exactly.
Entertainment is fine, but not endless scrolling.
There has to be an action. And I think right now it's like we're regurgitating the same thing over and over and over again. And, it's like we're watching a boxing match in the world. The world is a ring and we're watching it. And you have to get out of the stands. You have to get out of the stands. You have to get into the game. You have to decide what you're actually going to move forward. You have to also understand that typing a nasty comment is not an action. You've done nothing.
Right.
There's nothing to it. And that's why people don't feel as filled as they'd like to feel, because you're doing something, but you're really doing nothing.
You're not adding value to the world.
Exactly. Until you actually decide, oh, this situation's going on, whatever the thing is that you're drawn to, if it's whatever, do something about it, take some action, allow this device to be a tool to help you to figure out your purpose, to figure out what turns you on, to help you to inspire you creatively, to do something, to contribute in some way. Because quite frankly, we don't need an audience of, hecklers.
Right.
It's not productive. It's not helpful.
Even myself, like I'll see stuff sometimes and I might disagree with somebody, or I see somebody says something and it's wrong. And my instinct is to be like, no, like you're wrong. And I have stopped myself. I did it once where I corrected somebody and they got very, very upset with me. They had a lot of followers and I felt like the backlash, I realized like, oh, no, I should not have said this. It wasn't really important. I didn't add any value to the world. And the backlash that I got was
like I don't want it. Yeah.
Overwhelming. And it taught me a lesson. And so now I contribute positive comments. Mm-hmm. I love this. What a good idea. Thank you for sharing this. You look great. Whatever it is that kind of adds value to the platform, adds value to the audience, adds value to the creator, the influencer, but I really hold myself back. I don't correct anybody. I don't argue with anybody. It's just, there is no value. You don't win anything. You don't get paid. You don't have a better life. You don't
feel better.
You don't feel better. You don't look better. Like there is literally no value to you in disagreeing with somebody or arguing with somebody online. So it's just, I think that was kind of one of the biggest takeaways for me over the past 10 years was like, okay, positive comments only.
Yeah, absolutely. How can we support you?
If you're interested and it's not overwhelming, I would love people to subscribe to my newsletter, which is called ICYMI, or In Case You Missed It. And that tries to keep people up to date and tell them what are the important things to look at on social media. What are the trends? What are the news?
Where can we find that?
And so that's online. It's leahhaberman.substack.com.
Excellent. And that information we'll put into the show notes so people know how to get to it.
And I think, I'm also on every social platform. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram. I will see you there and just hopefully, I have provided some value or somebody got a spark. It sparked an idea or an intention in somebody to either change their mind or change the way that they use social media.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to come out in person, to have an in-person conversation.
Well, this is gorgeous. It was definitely worth the drive. Thank you.
The Straw Hut Media studio is amazing. It feels really good in here. Last question. What's happening in your world right now? What are you looking forward to?
That is a really good question. What am I looking forward to? I'm speaking at a conference in Australia in August.
Oh.
And so I'm looking forward to that. I'm dreading the flight because it's going to take a long time, but I am really looking forward to meeting new people, getting in front of a new audience, hearing what their perspective is. So I'm excited about that.
Drink lots of water before, during, and after.
I will take all the jet lag tips. That is what you can do for me. Give me jet lag tips. I will take all of them.
There we go. So go to Leah Haberman's pages and let's flood her feed with jet lag tips. There are lots of them. And thank you so much for the work that you're doing. I think that it's great to have people who are really focused on the industry, the world of social media, to kind of get us out of being within it, to kind of take that bird's eye view of what's going on and what we can do to help this tool to be more productive and more of a contribution.
Thank you. I appreciate your interest.
Yeah. And thank you so much for coming to talk with this audience. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening. That was Leah Haberman giving us actionable tips on how to use social media in a healthier way. This is Shaping Freedom with your host, Lisan Basquiat. Join us next week for another conversation about how to shape your freedom to help you show up more fully for yourself and for those with whom you interact.